Rutendo Channel Book Club. My name is Rutendo Mutsamwira and I'll be your guest host for today. I'd like to start off by welcoming everybody who's been a regular to these book club sessions, saying thank you so much for your continued support of this platform and these very important and critical conversations that we're having celebrating African storytellers. I do know that there are some people that are joining us for the very first time, so I think it's very important for you to understand more about Rutendo Channel and most importantly, why you are joining us tonight. For those of you that are not aware, Rutendo Channel was birthed in Zimbabwe and it is a video on-demand digital platform that speaks to the African woman both on the continent and abroad. Content that is produced on this channel is driven by the desire to showcase and unleash the power, grace, creativity, and strength of African women through literature. The book club in particular focuses on the stories of known and unknown poets as well as authors. Joining us today for a very important discussion is Shalom Govero. But before I introduce Shalom to you today, I wanted you to know that this is Global Money Week. For those of you that don't know what Global Money Week is, Global Money Week is an annual global awareness raising campaign on the importance of ensuring young people from an early age are financially aware and are gradually acquiring the knowledge, skills, attitudes, and behaviors necessary to make sound financial decisions and ultimately achieve financial well-being and financial resilience. As I mentioned earlier on, joining us today is Shalom Govero, and she is the author of the Personal Finance Game Plan. A royal round of applause for Shalom. Shalom, welcome to the book club.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I love Rutendo Channel, so I'm really happy to be here today.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Shalom. So Shalom, what I usually prefer to do is to ask my guests to introduce themselves, because when I look at the enormity of the work and impact that you've done, that would take half of today's conversation. So Shalom, in your words, how would you introduce yourself, and most importantly, what is it that you enjoy about the work that you do?
Thank you so much for that. So my name is Shalom Govero, as you've already alluded to. I am a financial education trainer. That's my sort of bread and butter. That's what I do mostly from 8 to 5 every day. And aside being a wife and a mother, of course, but I love simplicity. I'm a huge believer in simplicity. So a lot of my work revolves around helping to break down complex financial topics into easy to understand as well as practical sort of concepts that we can easily apply to our lives. So, you know, one of the things I always tell people that I'm so passionate about helping people find ways to enrich their lives through their money management skills. So that's also something that is a huge part of the work that I do. So I think in a nutshell, I think that's how I can introduce myself and maybe give a bit of insight into the work that I've done.
That's perfect, Shalom. Thank you so much for that. Just some quick housekeeping. Thank you so much to everybody that is joining us. If you have any comments or questions, please can you type them in the comment section, and I will dedicate time after our discussion to have Shalom answer those questions, just so that our conversation can flow, because I do know that a lot of people have got a number of questions that they have for you, Shalom. So Shalom, first things first, happy anniversary. Today is the 23rd of March, and Global Money Week is running from the 21st to the 27th of March this year. And talk to us a bit about what this day means for you as you launched your book last year. Talk us through how you started.
Great. So I've always been a huge follower of Global Money Week for a few years now. And because when I started off, in financial education training, I really was looking around for resources and sort of campaigns that were happening all over the world, not just here in Zimbabwe, to kind of, amplify the work around financial education and also to use it as an opportunity to bring forth some of the topics that we kind of like avoid any other time, right? So for me, last year, when I was thinking about releasing a book that would speak to personal finance, I chose to release it during Global Money Week, and I actually have a hard copy here with me. I wanted to show it off. But I released this book on the 23rd, so this is literally 1 year later. And I was excited to release it during Global Money Week because I wrote it for under 30s. Anybody who is under 30 who's trying to make sense of their finances. And one of the things that you realize is that if you're under 30, you are in a period of your life where a lot of things are changing. There's a lot of transition in your life. A lot of people who are under 30, it's not homogeneous. There are people who are starting families. There are people who are maybe starting off their career, the people were leaving school. So there's a lot of fluidity in that age group. And I really wanted to bring out some concepts that have helped me also, because actually last year I had turned 30 in February. So there were a lot of things happening at that time in my life. So I thought, let me put together all these different lessons into a book that I can give to under 30s and say, hey, this is how you can do money. And I've also done these things. I've also tried out these things and they've worked for me. So that's why Global Money Week has now just not become like a global campaign that I join in, but it's actually now become part and parcel of my career journey, and also something that's quite personal to me, because I can now say at 30, I then released a book that could also help my fellow young people.
Oh, Shalom, that is awesome. And I think it's so important to have stories that we can relate to. And I think for the longest time, a lot of us have had that frustration of reading a book or a manual that is not contextualized for where you come from, that has not done the necessary research for you to be able to practically apply some of the things that we learn and experience, because the Zimbabwean context and the African context is completely divorced from what we read and experience through other people. And the theme for this year's commemoration is build your future, be smart about money. And it's so important you mentioned that demographic that is for under 30s, but I think that this book is important for anyone and everyone, regardless of what stage of your life you're in. But what we're seeing throughout the world, as well as in Africa, there are a lot more opportunities for people to generate wealth or generate multiple income streams. You've seen more and more people getting into the NFT space, things that we don't understand yet. But I think these are very important conversations. Talk to us about the process in putting your book together. What sort of research did you undertake, if any? Because I do know that you shared some stories from your mother, from your friends. Talk to us about the production process and your writing process into getting your book together, Sean.
Excellent. Good question. I think for me, this is also sort of an output of a journey that I had taken. I've been training financial education since I think 2016. And I saw the impact of financial education principles in my own life. And one of the things that I find, which is very dynamic, is being able to take sort of like things that we can call, teaching concepts and put them in your life and experience them. They then take on a new meaning, right? So as I was thinking about, taking on, writing a book, it really came out of that. It came out of the sort of workshops I had done with people, the conversations I was having with people. And sometimes you're running a workshop and people are asking certain questions, and then you kind of pick a thread in what people are asking. And then you realize, well, there's something here. So I started writing. Initially, I started off writing articles where, I would literally like write one article per month. And I remember there's a client that came to me and said, hey, I read one of your articles. I think you should really consider writing a book. And to be fair, I laughed at the idea because I'm more of a speaker. I love to speak. I love to stand up in front of people and speak. I love writing, all right, but I think speaking for me is more of more of my personality. So it didn't quite resonate at the time. And then another client again commented after I released another article, and they're like, "You really write very well. Like we can follow your thought pattern, and it breaks down really complex stuff into very simple things. And there's a process." So I thought, okay, there is something here. If people keep saying it, maybe I need to sit down and actually put, pen and paper together. So initially, my thought pattern was, let me just write about lessons that my mother taught me. My mother has been, a big mentor of mine for many, many years in work, in business, as well as in the home, sort of in the dynamic space of the home. So I thought, let me write a book that just encapsulates the lessons she taught me. But as I was writing, I realized I didn't have the bandwidth to kind of write such an emotional memoir, so to speak. So I stopped, and then I took all the articles I'd been writing. Some of them actually never have made it to, have never actually seen the light of day. But I took all those articles, and then I started to condense them into the book that you now have now. So it was really coming out of the work that I was doing and the training that I was doing, and then also starting to connect the dots, looking at some of my friends' stories, and I started to connect the dots and said, well, there are threads here that I could develop into a story and develop into a book. So that's how the book came together.
Oh, I love it, Shalom. Thank you so much. And we're going to get into the book a bit more. What I loved about it, about how you got to the book, was that you were building on content. Because I know that there are some people who've had dreams of publishing, of writing books, of being at the place where you are. But then it just feels so daunting. It feels so intimidating that, okay, wow, where do I start with? But I think that helps for our viewers that are watching us live and those that shall watch the rebroadcast, that the most important thing is to start, and to start one step at a time, start one article, start one paragraph at a time, and archive that and build up on that body of work, and the importance of connecting the dots, because that's so important, so that your story is not just isolated, but your story is something that is relatable to people that have got shared experiences with what you have. So thank you for that, Shalom. I'm going to dive straight to page 28, because that was one of the most important things that I picked up. So I would like you, please, to read from page 28. Reading from one of my favorite quotes from a book called The Smart Money Woman, right up until poverty. Please, could you read that for us? And then we'll break it down for our viewers. Shalom. Just let me know when you found it.
Yeah, I found it. So it says one of my favorite quotes from a book called The Smart Money Woman by Nigerian author Arise Ugu says, broke people and rich people approach the same amount of money differently. And here is why. Broke people think it's about how much you earn, but rich people know it's about how much of your income you can keep and convert into assets that can provide you with an income in the future. To go a step further, we live in a world where some people are genuinely making it financially. No corrupt deals or stealing, while others are wallowing in dire poverty. While there's an undeniable responsibility on governments and social safety nets, our mindsets plays a bigger role in breaking the chain of poverty.
Oh, brilliant, Shalom. Thank you so much for reading that. I think that's such an important thing to be mindful of. No matter how big your aspirations are, whether your goal is to lose weight, whether your goal is to be more present in your children's life, or consistent in whatever it is you do, everything starts here. And it starts with mindset. And I know earlier in that chapter, you were talking about some of the mindset issues and myths that Zimbabweans and other Africans use and what I think is a form of escapism and a lack of accountability. But what would you think are some of the measures that our viewers can adopt to try and get from that? Because also remember, when you talk about mindset issues, a lot of the times we inherit generational patterns around our attitude with money. We inherited spending patterns, and conversations around money in our culture are not always shared. It's very sad that in some families, it takes the death of the breadwinner for people to be able to realize the financial situation in a home, or it takes a divorce for the spouse to realize that, ooh, hang on, I'm in a very dire situation. So what are practical ways that our viewers can start working on cultivating the right mindset for them to be able to be in a better position in terms of their financial literacy and creating sustainable financial discipline and practices in their day-to-day lives?
So even as I wrote in the book, I feel like exposure to good or healthy financial literature can really help to take us to the next level. A lot of what we're fighting with, right? Yes, of course, there's ignorance, there's trauma, there's upbringing and things like that. But I also think that you have a part to play as a person, because as a man thinketh, so is he, right? So if I'm able to feed my mind with the right or the healthy perspectives around money, it translates into what I do. And a lot of it also has to do with really sitting down and unlearning some of these unhealthy financial habits, unhealthy financial philosophies that we've picked up, and to be able to call them out. So a lot of the times that, someone will say, well, I struggle with budgeting, for example. And then I say, why is that? Like, have you actually sat down and asked yourself why? Why am I struggling with this? Because a lot of the times we don't think about it too much. And, when we're talking about money, we're talking about how can we just feed our families and make sure that they have everything that they need. So we don't actually sit down and say to ourselves, why am I feeling the way I'm feeling? Why am I maybe struggling with picking up a healthy financial habit? So I think taking that step back to really look at ourselves and say, hey, there is something here that I need to work on. It's the same thing that how addicts will tell you that I'm not addicted. I'm not an addict. I'm not an addict to alcohol, or I'm not an addict to drugs, when evidently they are. But until they actually come to a place of admitting that they have a problem, they never get the help that they need. So there's an aspect of admitting where you are and being real and honest with yourself. Then there's also the aspect of saying, am I feeding my mind with the right literature that helps me to develop new habits, new thought patterns, and new philosophies and new beliefs? Because if I constantly also expose my mind to the right literature, it then begins to work over and over again. It's not something that you do it once. You have to constantly remind yourself. It's the way, like, if we're Christians, we have to read the Bible every day, right? That's what people usually say, because you're trying to remind yourself, of your identity, of who you are, and all of that. It's in the same vein as well. It's a daily thing that you need to do.
It's a daily thing. It's a lifelong thing, and like you rightfully said, it's about taking responsibility, self-awareness, self-accountability. It is very uncomfortable, but it is so important to break those habits and to be in a better place where in the next 10, 15, 30 years, you are in a better place. And it's always realizing what is the opportunity cost, right? I always laugh at one of my nieces. She always complains that she doesn't have enough money to go out and do certain things, but she's always got airtime and data to be online streaming Netflix. I'm like, how does it work? So I think it comes to a place where you have to have that honest conversation with yourself and see, okay, what is the life that you want to live, that you want to lead? You have to be laser focused on what it is that you want to do, and find and realize what works for you, right? And I know in one of the other chapters, you talk about the importance of creating multiple income streams and planning for a rainy day and, planning forward. So talk to us a bit about what some of the plans you have with the personal finance game plan. I mean, if Smart Money Woman was developed into a program on Netflix, can we expect that from you? Is that in the works?
I'm not sure about a film, but I've been thinking a lot around, skits, because I've seen that people respond a lot to that. But actually, I have a bit of an announcement. So those who are here will hear it first. I am working on a second book, and it's a spin-off. It's a spin-off from this book, but from the final chapter, which is on love and money, right? So yeah, it's a spin-off from that. I really want to. I've actually been working on it. I've actually been writing. It's taking a lot out of me, I must say, because I think talking about what sort of conversations we need to have as partners, people who are dating or people who are married, means that there's a lot of work that we need to do. So it's going to be a handbook primarily for those who are either married or those who are working on getting married. It'll be called the 7 Money Conversations that you need to have with your spouse or your significant other. So yeah, that's an announcement that I thought, let me save it for Tando Channel. Yeah, and I'll be releasing tidbits
Channel
from that.
exclusive. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for honoring us with that announcement. Sapi Bachi says, congratulations. Just also going to take some time to acknowledge those that are joining us. Welcome to the Tando Channel Book Club. My name is Rutendo Mutsamwira. I am your guest host for this evening. And joining us today is Shalom Govero, the author of the Personal Finance Game Plan, as we celebrate Global Money Week this year. Selena Zigoma says, definitely it starts with owning the life we want to live in our intentions and choices. Multiple incomes are imperative, and that's Sapi Bachi. And then hello to Ngambo Chazia, joining us from Zambia. Thank you so much for joining us. And for those that are going to be watching the rebroadcast, thank you for taking the time to join us. Today, our conversation is not only in learning from Shalom's journey, but it's also in unpacking some of these important conversations that we need to be having with ourselves as well as others. And Faina Mbereko says, wow, that's a much needed workbook, especially for people in relationships. I was reading a study that said that 70% of divorces are because of money issues, communication about money, uncommunicated expectations, different money philosophies. And we just came from the month of love, where if you look on social media, it's hashtag relationship goals, hashtag couple goals. But I'll be interested to know from our viewers, what are your hashtag money relationship goals? What is your relationship with money? Shalom, talk to us a bit about, obviously you can't disclose your clients, but what are some of the common issues that come up in your individual clients? And obviously for you to be writing a handbook that relates to couples, what are some of the issues that are being brought up from your session clients, and then also from the feedback that you are from your first book, the Personal Finance Game Plan?
Do you know what the biggest challenge is? Is that we are not learning together. We're not on the table together, men and women. So the funniest part of all of this is that even this whole year, I have received so many invites to come and speak at women's events, right? To talk about money, to talk about the book. Just this weekend, I was with ladies. They bought 20 of my books, a book for each woman. They were at a retreat. They called me to come and speak to them. So women are coming to the table and are talking about these issues in their own groups, right? But then the challenge is that your spouse is not on the same table. Your spouse is not also getting the same input that you are getting. So how then can you actually move forward? if you're not all receiving sort of the same exposure, you're not all working together to unlearn, societal beliefs that maybe you've held on to. Also, it becomes really difficult for you to hold each other accountable if you're not on the same page. So as an example, my husband and I have actually trained in financial education together. So we now are able to actually train couples groups together, because one of the things that we've realized is that a lot of these conversations are happening in isolation. And that's where the challenge is. If we are not learning together, it becomes difficult for us to plan lives together. And I think moving on from there also, one of the other issues is that we are also not creating safe spaces where, we're seeing models of people who have done this, who are actually being honest with maybe some of their struggles when it comes to money and stuff like that. So even when we do our sessions with couples, we're very honest about some of the challenges we've had, some of the issues that we've faced in managing money, because even if you are doing well financially, you will still have challenges, just the two of you managing each other's expectations, how to communicate effectively around the issues of money. All of those are issues that you still need to work on. And then I think finally, one of the things I should also comment on is that there is a sort of a perspective that, we don't necessarily need to learn about these things. We can just do them. Like our parents didn't learn about them, but we went to school and, we did okay, type of thing.
What?
But I think we actually...
How does that work? Like, make it make
Exactly.
sense. What do you mean?
Thank you for asking that. But actually, that's actually a lot of the pushback I have received. And it actually sometimes is not said explicitly like that, but it's in how people will take whatever you say for granted, because they don't really see the need for it. But they're maybe struggling and fighting with their spouse over money. But they don't see that it's actually because you're not learning together about money. You're not reading from the same handbook or from the same hymn book. You're not singing from the same hymn book. So it becomes really difficult, for us to say we're building a life together when we're not singing from the same hymn book. So that attitude, that we have sort of like against some of these. And, it also comes down to one of the things that people often say, oh, these motivational speakers, they're just motivational speakers. They're not realistic, when actually there's a place for motivational speaking, right? So that attitude is what is going to hinder us from going to the next level. And that's why I said, I want to write this book. But the way I'm writing it also, it's actually, somebody said a workbook. It's actually going to be a workbook with questions that you and your spouse need to work through. Because if you don't do that, you're never going to be able to have breakthroughs in your finances, just the two of you, because you'll always be kind of like fighting around the same issues. So yeah, I am looking forward to the pushback around that.
Yeah, watch this space, jeepers. Thank you for breaking that for breaking that up, because another thing that I've always been interested in is that transition from authors. You're naturally a speaker, which is great. But I think that is why forums like the book club are important, to unpack these conversations, but then also to be able to be in a place where you unpack with people that may not necessarily have read your book, but these are important societal matters. So how do we marry conversations around the table to have practical solutions? Because now if I go to a retreat and I get Shalom's personal finance plan, I'm excited. I want everybody to know. So I'm like, okay, maybe this month let's do this. And then my husband on the other side is like, first of all, are you married to Shalom or are you married to me? Right? So
Exactly.
it's a lot. It's a lot, but again, we have to get to this place where we get to understanding and compromise, and it takes a lot of work, because again, when I revert back to that part in your book that you read on page 28, I'll just read that for those that are just joining us. And in particular, this line, one moment, please, where you said, while there is an undeniable responsibility, governance, and social safety nets, our mindset play a bigger role in breaking the chain of poverty. Now, there is no nation that does not have issues. Every nation has got issues. Every government has got somebody saying, guys. But I think a lot of the times, our nations reflect our homes. Our economies reflect the economies. And so this is just a challenge to everybody that's watching, that, yes, of course, our government and everybody needs to be held accountable in whatever capacity, but let's start with you on an individual level. What sort of families do we want to nurture? What sort of communities do we want to live in? Because I like Jonathan, I believe this is your husband, he says, Shalom's motto, bringing money conversations to the kitchen table. And I think that's such important work that you're doing, because if you're looking at the population in Africa, we've got the largest youth population, which means that we're already, whether we acknowledge it or not, we're already in training for leadership of our organizations, of our community. So we really have to start now being the change that we wish to see in our nations. Geez,
Yeah, you're onto something there. You're onto something. I think one of the aspects also, like what you were mentioning, that I think in every country we will see that there are challenges that people have, maybe, or issues that they have with sitting governments. And I wanted to also bring out the aspect that there's a Netflix show that I was watching the other day where this young lady, she's trying to leave her husband who's been abusive, and she's working through the social welfare sort of system and whatever to get herself out of that situation. But then she starts to work, and she's never worked ever since university because she was just being taken care of by her husband. And you can actually see that there's a lot of work, internal work, that she's doing, because the social welfare systems in that country, and actually it's a huge country, I think it's based on the US, and the social welfare system there is meant to house you for a certain period, and you need to graduate out of it. So what that means is that the internal work needs to be done, whether you are in a decent country or in a country that's facing a lot of economic challenges like our own. You still need to work on yourself. You still need to say, hey, how am I doing? What's my responsibility? Even if I'm earning very little, how can I make the most of the little that I'm making? So like I'll use a very practical example. Right now, a lot of people are saying, well, I'm earning in Zimbabwean dollars. There is an option for you to actually put that money on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, stretch that money. I have people who've put money on the stock exchange for 3-4 months. It has doubled or tripled at times in value. So what is that telling us? It's telling us that even in difficult situations, if you're willing to sit down and say, I'm looking for a way out, you'll find it. You actually find it. And we need to start being a little more responsible with what we have in our hands. Because like you mentioned, our nations reflect what's actually happening in our homes. And if we're gonna make the nations we live in a lot more livable, and a place where we want to raise our children, it needs to start with us doing the best we can to break that cycle of poverty. Whether it's you've got very little or you've got a lot, do the best you can with what you have, so that your children tomorrow will not say, you know what, if it wasn't for my mother or if it wasn't for my father, I probably would have done better in my life. Yeah.
Oh, Shalom, thank you so much for that. And I know that's a sobering area. And Ngambo says our nations reflect our homes. It is very sobering. And I think the more we remind ourselves of that, the more we will hold ourselves and each other accountable, right? But moving on to the next segment of our conversation, as we get ready to wrap up, Shalom. One of the areas that we're focusing on as the Tando Channel Book Club is exploring the larger conversation around African female authors and their collective identity in the mainstream. For instance, are African female authors deemed too difficult to read, too dreary, too depressing? A lot of things have been said. What is your take on how African female authors perceived, and how have you, as a female author, or even just as an author, what has your journey and experience been like?
I think from the wider perspective, I may not have a lot of bandwidth to speak on that, because for me, this is a relatively new area for me. I actually joined a women's writers WhatsApp group a few months ago, and I was just reading through and I was thinking, man, this is just amazing to be in a space where you're hearing so many different voices. And of course, there's so many genres of books and all of that. So it for me, it was extremely exciting to see how many we have. And this is just like Zimbabwean authors that have been put on this platform. And these are sort of like underground. Some have never been published. Some have got just pieces of work that they're sitting on. So I think one of my biggest takeaway from that was also the fact that I don't think we're doing enough to actually show people that to write and publish is actually not that difficult. I didn't face that difficulty even to like publish, to get an ISBN number. It wasn't even that difficult for me. So I've always felt like we need to just actually be getting people to lose that procrastination mindset and say, hey, get that thing published, and this is how you can do it. Because, like, as an example, down to my book cover, I created this myself. So there's so many tools, there's so many resources you can use to do things by yourself and be able to publish. It's just that sometimes I think there's this view that, oh, publishing, it's something reserved for those maybe we have lots of money, or who knows a publisher. Like, somebody was asking me, so who is your publisher? And I was like, well, in Africa, does it really actually matter who is my publisher? Like, I can just publish a book if I wanted to, right? Independent publishing is very, very possible. And these days, because there's so many platforms, from Gumroad to Amazon, so many platforms to put your book on, you don't necessarily have to rely on getting to a publisher first. So I think for me, that's been my experience, looking at just the landscape and realizing that people are holding back instead of actually jumping in there and saying, let's do this. And also, maybe it's because a lot of the things is that we overthink. Writers generally overthink, right? They overthink. They write a script, they rewrite, they edit, they take it to the proofreaders and say, no, it's not good enough. Then they start from scratch. So that overthinking, I think, is an internal thing, an internal mindset thing that people need to actually jump over for them to actually say, let me then go and publish. Then for me, in terms of my own journey, I felt like the reception has been amazing, because I was building up to it. If that makes sense. I was building my community, so to speak, and I was making sure people understood that I just didn't want this to be one other book that you read on money and throw on your shelf and you forget it. I wanted it to be more of a sort of like not just a journey, but sort of like we're starting a revolution around money issues and around money conversations. So I remember even, because I launched it in March, but in January, I started like running free financial planning challenges, connecting with people, building my community around that, because I knew that in March, I wanted to release a book. So I started from far, really trying to build my community so that by the time I released the book, I was, people were expectant, they were ready for it. So that really, really helped. And a lot of people have actually told me, this book is too small, like, you should have made it bigger. And I was like, well, yeah, I know, but it's a first book and I don't want to overwhelm myself, because I'm still learning how to write. Yeah.
Oh, I absolutely love that, Shalom. Thank you so much. And like you rightfully said, writers tend to overthink. And again, representation matters. I think a lot of people are not aware that there are platforms such as Tando Channel and the Book Club. And this is very important work that they're doing, because somebody will think of publishing, then they're thinking of J.K. Rowling, then they hear of the stories about how she was rejected. Now they're taking on her rejection and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be rejected. So who's going to want to read my script? What's going to happen? Two very important questions about your intellectual property, right? As much as you're saying anybody can publish, what sort of measures did you have in place to ensure that, well, you took your book to someone and the next thing you know, your book has been, readapted in a different way? Is there any sort of mechanization that you took in place to protect your intellectual property, if any?
I don't know if I can say measures that I took in place. To be fair, one of the only other things that I did was I then engaged a publisher for the sole purpose of, the last part of my process. So I had people editing and proofreading, people that I've worked with for many years that know the kind of work that I'm doing. Because also one of the things that was quite interesting was that this is not like a novel. This is a practical self-help book. So I needed somebody who could understand my line of work, my line of thinking, who also maybe appreciates financial literacy, as it were, and who could read it and say, I get what you're trying to say, and doesn't edit and remove the meaning of what I was trying to say. So there was that as well. And then in the last part of it, I then engaged a publisher to say, okay, can you then put this into, typesetting and all of those other technical things. So from that end, that's pretty much what I did. Nothing more than that. And obviously the ISBN numbers, trying to make sure that I had the correct ones and all of that. That's all I did.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And Shalom, also not to overstep this boundary with you, are you in a position to share what you budgeted? Because another thing is, you never have authors that say, well, you know what, guys, I spent $300 to get this book, or for me to get my first print run of 100 copies and to get myself on Amazon, I needed this cost. Because again, also I feel that's also another hindrance where people hold back before they've even heard from someone that, well, budget $500, work with that sort of a ballpark figure to help people that are starting off. How much and a ballpark figure did you have to work with for you to be able to get that book in your hand?
So I think the biggest cost for me was the website. I wanted people to be able to buy directly off the website. And initially, the website was going to house also like a financial education course. So that was kind of my biggest cost. Maybe costed me about $600 to $700 to get that set up, together with the Pay Now, the payment platform that I then chose. So yeah, it was about between $700 and $750 to get that done. But then for the actual book itself, I think I spent between $300 to $400 to get the the editing done, to get the typesetting done. Editing and typesetting wasn't as expensive as I thought it would be, but I think it was between $300 and $400 all in all. I used two editors. So I had one who did the first run, because my book was very raw at the very beginning. And then they charged me for that. And then I then took it to the publisher, who then did her own sort of editing and typesetting. And that came to about 350, 380, thereabout. Yeah. And then, the actual printing, each book is actually quite cheap to print. I think it's below $2 to print one copy. And it's a decent copy. I got, a good printer to do it for me. So it's not that expensive.
No, it's not. And thank you so much for being transparent and sharing that. So anybody who's listening or that shall listen, no more excuses, because at least now you've got a ballpark figure. You can shop around also, so that you're informed when you're making your decision on who it is that you're going to publish with, or as an editor. At least when you have a ballpark figure, when somebody's trying to hoodwink out of your money. So Shalom, thank you so much for your transparency. As we get ready to wrap up, I just wanted to open up the floor for questions from anybody. If you've got any comments that you would like, or if you've got any questions that you have for Shalom, or as well as your input. Remember, as much as Shalom and I are having a conversation, this is a community. This is an opportunity for us to learn with one another, because again, the solutions that we need and have for our nation start with one conversation. So I'm just going to open up to the floor and get ready to wrap up tonight's conversation. So Shalom, whilst we wait for some questions, what are some of your favorite books from African authors? It doesn't matter where, what is your most impactful African book that you bring? Wow, I relate to this, or the story related with me.
I think you already know that answer. Smart Money Woman for me was probably it ranks number one. Maybe because I enjoy literature that really has to do with these money issues. But the way she wrote it, the fact that it was kind of like a novel following the lives of these different women and bringing out the issues so beautifully, it probably was one of the books that I read and thought, I actually can write about money. That was the book that made it for me. The others, I mean, they're just novels, but that one, I think I can put it out there that, hey, I'm a big fan of that woman. I think one day I need to
You
meet
really
her.
are. You're
I
like
need to
glowing.
fangirl her.
We've got a fangirl right over here, fangirl situation. Thank you so much. So we've got a question from Ngambo Chazia. Ngambo says, when will the workbook be ready? Great question.
Great question. Great question. I wanted it to be ready in April because that's when my husband and I celebrate 7 years of being married. So I thought, this would be really cool. Thank you. But I don't know if we'll be ready for then because as I said, there's a lot of things that I felt like I'm unpacking and I'm taking people in. It's not going to be as short and as small as this first book. It's going to be much bigger. And obviously, this aspect of questions is what's making it take a bit of time for me to write. So I think I would just say it'll be ready when it's ready. Maybe May or June. We'll see what happens.
Well, I think for everybody that heard that this was a Tando channel book club exclusive, this will be the first place you'll hear when the book will be launched. Okay, I think it's safe to say that. So Shalom, before we head out, for those that would like to contact you, please can you share your social media handles as well as how anybody can contact you for more information to purchase your book or take part in your workshops?
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. So I actually have a website, The Finance Wiz, thefinancewiz.co.co, and you can buy the book over there. You can also read articles. I'm very inconsistent in publishing my articles. So I think it's one of those things that when it comes, I write. So, but then, there are some articles archived there. And then you can also follow me on Twitter. It's Shalom_MSA. On Instagram, it's Shalom_the Finance Wiz. And on Facebook, it's the Finance Wiz. You can, then see if there are any workshops running, any online stuff that's going on, even any Facebook Lives. I often put up here and there. I will be on radio next week on Monday, so that should be fun. I haven't been on radio in a long, long while, so I'm going back to Star FM on Monday, so you can also catch me on that as well.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much, Shalom, for taking the time to share your journey and your nuggets with us, and as well as a huge thank you to everybody that tuned in, sharing your comments and feedback with us. It has been an absolute blessing and honor being your guest host tonight. Thank you so much, and we wish you nothing but the absolute best in everything. And remember, where our nation can be is dependent on how well you manage yourself, your finances. That's all from me, and that's all from Shalom and myself and the Tando Channel Book Club. God bless and good night. Bye-bye.